it look like when the worlds of music and social good intersect? That's the question that I look at on this podcast. It's called It's Giving, and it's hosted by me, Ingela Travers-Hayward. This week, it's giving Azniv Korkejian, better known by her stage name of Bedouine. Azniv has been a musician for over a decade. She has toured with the likes of Father John Misty, Fleet Foxes, Kevin Morby, and throughout her time as a musician, she has always really emphasized the importance of raising awareness. A big reason for that is Azniv is Syrian American, and so the story of where she came from, the story of what her family went through, not only infuses her music, but it also informs a lot of the conversations that she has with fans all across the country as she tours. The majority of these are positive conversations, but what Azniv talks about, which is really similar to what August spoke about in last week's episode, is even when these conversations maybe aren't quite as positive, when, you're talking to someone with a totally different viewpoint, those conversations are almost just as important, if not more so, than ones that you're having with the people that really agree with you. Because while you might not walk away having changed someone's mind, I think being able to be respectful and in this day and age, talk to someone who disagrees with you is one of the most important lessons that we can learn how to do right now. So we talk all about that. And then at the end of the conversation, we actually end up in Lexington, Kentucky, which is where Azniv lived for a bunch of years. And she still cares deeply about the political scene there because if you know anything about Kentucky, never a dull moment with the politics down there. So you could say that this is a very global episode of It's Giving. We start in Syria and end up in Kentucky. And I really enjoyed and appreciated that Azniv sat down and talked to me. And so as always, if you enjoyed this conversation, go back and listen to the other interviews I've done. This is episode 9. That means there are interviews with 8 other artists waiting for you this very second. It's available wherever you listen to podcasts, as well as on YouTube. And if you're enjoying it, go ahead and press subscribe. That kind of support just means the world to me. It shows me that you're enjoying this, and it's going to keep me pushing myself forward and bringing you a new episode every single week. And with that, here's Azniv. Hope you enjoy your week. Azniv, thank you so much for talking to me. I really appreciate it.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me.
So I usually start off pretty broad with this stuff. It's a podcast about music and social good. Do you sort of have an example that comes to mind when you think of music being used in this really powerful way for social good? Is there something, either in history or more recent that comes to mind, either from yourself or through another musician?
What tends to come to mind for me is the organizers. So my experience with the intersection of music and activism is being asked to contribute to a compilation or something like that. And that's just a no-brainer. Why not? If you especially if you have something lying around when they're just maybe if you have a demo of some kind or something unreleased, it's just sitting there and it's everybody wins, And so what comes to mind for me are the organizers that put that stuff together, and they're behind the scenes. They don't get any of the glory of it or anything. There's nothing in it for them except for they get to feel really good about it. And so that's what comes to mind for me. I've thought of other kind of creative ways to get involved, but I think a lot of it, my experience or introduction at least, is being asked to contribute to these compilations.
That answer sort of makes me sort of want to jump ahead because I think it's really intriguing. How do you decide, from a more nuts and bolts perspective, how do you decide if someone comes to you and says, yeah, do you have that unreleased demo? Do you have this? Do you have that? How do you decide who to partner with? And what's that process like? I always wondered sort of from the musician side because, I run a nonprofit, so I'm usually the one asking people to do things. But from your side, how does that work?
I think you poke around a little bit. It always helps if someone's oh, so-and-so is already on board. It kind of legitimizes the project. That good people are involved. And so I know that's a balancing act for people like you when you want to get one person on and then the other and build. Maybe it's difficult to just springboard, but that always helps just know that you're working with people that have good intentions and you can trust their process a little bit more. And also just like the capacity to contribute. Like if someone's asking for a new recording, it's not always possible. I mean, and also it can be expensive, or like you're asking for favors, and a lot of doing what I do is asking friends for favors because you're working with a very, very limited budget a lot of times, or at least at my scale. And so I think it's like a few different things that the stars sometimes they have to align a little bit.
Where the cause comes into play, how do you decide, okay, we're doing a benefit album, for example, for reproductive rights, or we're doing a benefit concert for Gaza? How do you decide, okay, yes, this is something that I'm going to lend my stuff to or lend my time to? Does it, because I think a lot about, does it come down to your own personal beliefs, or does it come down to sort of something bigger picture? Yeah. How do you decide what cause gets your support?
I think it's very intuitive. I think each one of us is drawn to different things, and that I think we should follow those threads because it helps to be passionate about them. I think if there's probably like some things that maybe I think less about. However, I know that they're good for the they're for the greater good. So if I can, I will still do it, get involved however I can. But then maybe the things that drive me they just like take up more space in my mind, and maybe I'll be a little bit more creative about building something from nothing. But maybe the things that don't come to my mind as much, but I'm being asked to contribute, I would happily contribute if I feel like it's still for the greater good.
I think in terms of sort of you personally, what are those things that you do care more about? Because yeah, I've, done a little bit of research, and I think you seem like one of these people whose personal experience and who you are personally, that affects a lot about what the causes you're vocal about, the things that are happening in the world that you want to raise funds for. How do you decide, or what are those things that really matter to you?
I think one of my priorities, or like just something I keep returning to, is just like humanizing people that have maybe been depicted a certain way, or depicted as violent, or like, put under some kind of monolith, when that's just not how people work anywhere in the world. So I think, yeah, I think humanizing people, helping with resources in certain regions of the world that are being really like affected.
What are those places, and who are those people that you care about?
I think like Western Asia in general, Syria, where I was born, Lebanon, where my mom was raised, Palestine, because that feels like such a really easy access point just for empathy. It feels so clear, the imbalances that are going on. And yeah, I think those are the places I think a lot about. And Armenia, even though strangely, because I am Armenian, like you would think that would be like the first one, but it's a bit different being part of the diaspora from Syria, which is what my family has been. So it's actually quite different. My relationship to Armenia is quite new, but there's lots there to unpack what's going on with Armenia and Azerbaijan. So to me, it's generally the West Asian region that I think of a lot when it comes to these more like thinking of making something out of nothing, like the things that drive me.
What is it like, you're born in Syria, you're Armenian. What is it like having conversations with people in America about that stuff, because you infuse it a lot in your work and things like that? What is it like sort of talking about that with people who aren't as aware?
It feels so personal to me, so I really feel like I'm telling a personal story. Um, because I think it's really easy to like underestimate yourself when it comes to like not feeling educated enough, or not knowing all the facts and things like that. Um, and I have all those, feelings too, and the imposter syndrome when it comes to the news and stuff, because But then you have to remind yourself that like it's such a tactic that people use to like make you feel like you're not smart enough to speak to this. So I think you just have to tap into the human side of yourself. And for me, that's speaking from personal experience, having lived in those places, feeling like my family's been torn apart for decisions that we had nothing to do with. And yes, it's just speaking to that and speaking really simply to the fact that I just like miss when everyone was in the same place and we could see each other, like so much of my family I haven't seen just because it's become really difficult logistically. So I think more than anything, it's like speaking from personal experience, which feels really natural to me. More natural than I ever would have thought, to be honest.
Yeah. Why did you assume that it wouldn't feel natural?
Because I don't know, politics can make people uncomfortable, or like they think it's divisive. And I really try to tap into the approach of it's not divisive. Like, like for instance, everyone deserves equal rights. Everyone deserves human rights. I think that's like an absolute truth that is not like biased. And you can get into the details of that, and maybe there's some thorns in there, but like starting from a place that like is very inviting and approachable, like everyone deserves human rights, and then like unpack, well, what's the reality? That's what the goal is. What's the reality? And so I think that's a good place to start.
It's interesting you bring up or you mention imposter syndrome, because I think a lot about, okay, when a professional musician now is a known person and you have this sort of platform that that is at your disposal, and then there are all of these, awful things that are happening in the world, one after another. I always wonder about how that works with how you feel about speaking out on certain things that, yeah, objectively are terrible. You might not know that much about them, but you still want to make people aware that like this is happening and this is going on. I guess all that to say, do you ever struggle with deciding I want to make it publicly known through social media? Or I mean, social media is always usually the main one because it's so immediate. Do you have a hard time deciding what I want to publicly stand for and what I don't through that medium?
I don't think I think of it too much. I don't think about it in too much detail. It feels really intuitive. I think I had a response right when you were talking and it got away from me. But here's what I think. I think that with some issues, I really want to know where people stand. And so with those issues, I want people to know where I stand. So it's more of this desire. I think it's just as much a desire to be understood, and as well as like wanting to do good. Like when it comes to like Palestine, for instance, I want to know where my favorite musicians stand. And there's a lot of people that I haven't heard from. And it's not even that I need their virtue signaling or whatever it is. I know that we're really limited in what we can do. I know that. I still think every bit matters, and I still think that like we have to try or make it somehow like, disarm people so they feel more comfortable speaking about these things. But personally, as a person, as a consumer, as a person who listens to music, I want to know where my favorite musicians stand. And I don't like that I don't know all of them.
That's so interesting, because I like a thing that I think a lot about is, as a musician, do you feel like I worded it badly. Do you feel like musicians have a responsibility to speak about, these big issues that we all know are going on? Not, the micro, not to say that the things happening on like this tiny local level aren't as important, but the things like, yeah, Palestine, that are just unavoidable in this day and age to think about. Do you think musicians have a responsibility to let people know where they stand?
I don't know. I don't know if I would word it that way. Like, I just think it's like baked into you as a person. Like, less of a responsibility of more like you're a person with an opinion on everything, right? You exist in the world, like you must have some kind of reflection on what's going on, and I think everything is political. And so I think it's like when somebody doesn't when somebody doesn't speak to something that's like so apparent or like so ubiquitous, it feels like a piece of them is missing or something. Like they're carving out this. They're just shape shifting into this weird, presence to ignore the fire burning around them or something. So I don't know. It's like less a responsibility and more just like how do you be a person in this world without thinking about it? And here's the thing I think that is important too. I think people love to shame people for not speaking out or promoting a record while this is happening or something. But things can be true. Like you can promote your record because we still have to pay the rent, and then you can still be like react to the world. I don't think it has to be mutually exclusive. And I don't like that people are being shamed, or
Is that
feel
something
ashamed.
that is happening?
Sorry.
This sort of like, oh, why you're just trying to promote your album, but then you're also being, what is it, critiqued at the same time for not speaking out? Or is it like you're being critiqued for talking about something that isn't exclusively the issue at hand?
I don't know. I think people just like to yell into the void, you know. I just, um, yeah, I think we're all angry and doing our best, and sometimes it comes out as just like shaming people. Um, and I know maybe sometimes shaming people is effective, but I think sometimes it makes people really scared to speak freely.
You said that, you feel like it's something that is either baked into you or not. What is it that, what is it that in your life that informed it being baked into you? Because it seems like, yeah, evidently you want people to know where you stand. What is it that made you a person that is willing to take stands for what you care about?
I think I am maybe, by the subjects I mentioned earlier, I feel I'm so personally affected by them and my family's so personally affected by them, that I can't help to bring it up. And honestly, I feel like I even maybe don't talk about it as much, because, I don't know why. I could probably talk about it more, even if it's just like, I don't know, sharing photos of myself in these places that I mentioned, and um, that maybe some people don't actually know that the places that I'm from. But when I do, it's just really personal, um, and so it feels like natural. It doesn't feel forced. And so I do think like when it comes to activism, it might be important to figure out what your strengths are, what gifts you have to share, and so that it feels natural to you.
Yeah, so that it doesn't feel like it's this sort of you're trying to fit a square peg into a round hole sort of thing. You're forcing it and feeling. I could imagine it could like quickly start like giving yourself the ick or something like that.
Yeah, like just feel inauthentic, and I think people can sense that. And so I would think that's a good place to start. Like, what do you have to offer? And then also, I think like if you don't feel comfortable using your own language or your own words, I think also just like making space to amplify other people. Like one thing I did once was I invited city council candidates to come speak before my set in Los Angeles, and that was so cool because I didn't have to feel like I was sticking my neck out and saying something that was inaccurate. I just like carved a little space out for them before my set, and they each gave like their stump speeches to their constituents, so I think that also that's an approach that maybe some people might feel more comfortable is like making space on their platform for other people's, because I really do think that like we have to make space for the organizers that are behind the scenes too.
Are there any organizations or people you know of that are sort of great examples of those organizers? Because yeah, like obviously you're someone that has seen what goes on behind the scenes and stuff like that. Are there some that have really impressed you with what they're doing?
I think there's like people that work for DSA that are always like they'll like reach out when they're putting together benefit concerts. I don't know them by hand because there's there's a variety of people that reach out, but yeah, people like that who are like putting concerts together. I think that's really helpful, and that's like an easy way to help out too.
This sort of pivots a little bit, but yeah, and when you mention concerts, it makes me think of that. Have you had or have you gotten to have any really interesting conversations with people at your shows or even online because you share so much about what your family's gone through, where you're from? Have you been able to talk about stuff like that with people?
Yeah, I've had some pretty uncomfortable conversations. Actually, I wouldn't consider them uncomfortable. Maybe other people might. I actually really like the rub. Um, I think it is quite time consuming and so logistically it's like it's not always practical. Um, but I actually really do like disagreeing with people because that's like where the spark is, like where where the friction is where the spark is. And so yeah, I'd have gotten into some back and it's always pretty respectful. And if anything, it bothers me when it just like falls off. Because a lot of times what happens in those situations is that like one person just stops responding and you're just like, wait a second, we were we were onto something.
Yeah, I live in New York now, but I lived in Ohio for 5 years, and talking about the sort of disagreeing, I think like yeah, Ohio is a place where, I mean, I lived in a very liberal city, but you're still in a state that's like heavily red. And so you're constantly bumping up against people who, you come in contact with every day who have these vastly different opinions from yours. And I think being able to withstand those conversations, or not withstand, but to be able to have those conversations, I think is really important because otherwise, you're just existing in this vacuum. And it's not to say that you have to change everyone's mind that you come in contact with, but I think being able to, or even remotely agree with them, but I think
Mhm.
it's being able to at least talk to them, I think seems to me like it's a really important thing.
Yeah, I think it is important, and of course, like we have to practice self-preservation too, and so you will pick and choose what's sustainable for you, so that you can keep going and not just burn out. But yeah, I do think it's important, and I think there's ways that you can land on common ground or start with common ground, like I mentioned before, like everyone deserves human rights, right? Yeah, okay, so who's not getting them? And then also I think like it was a strange, I don't want to call it a silver lining because nothing's good about these things, but like um but like Russia invading Ukraine the same time that like Israel's invading Palestine, and how some people can be against one of them and for the other. It's like, okay, let's sit down with that for a second. Like, what is it? Because the parallels there were like astounding, and how people were advocating for Ukraine in ways that I hadn't seen them advocate for Palestine. And so that was like really confusing. So like bringing those kind of like comparables and stuff to the table too can be helpful. Um, and or like Iran, like so many people. Anyway, I won't get into details, um, but like the inconsistencies with people's arguments. Um, I think that's also like a place to start. Like, oh, you feel this way about that, but you don't feel this way about that. Like, and what are the differences to you? Like, why do you think you're reacting differently to those things? I'm curious to know.
When you're talking with someone about Iran, about Ukraine and Russia. These are topics that I think a lot of people want to speak about without a lot of deep knowledge. And I think you are someone that does have a deep knowledge. And so how do you navigate that conversation when you're talking with someone whose opinion you're sort of maybe confused about, but yeah, it's maybe not an opinion that comes from that informed of a place, if that makes sense.
Well, I don't always feel well informed, but I feel like sometimes you can just use your gut, like, and like go back to simplifying it to all people deserve human rights. It could be that simple. It could be like, these babies are innocent. Why are we hurting them? I think it doesn't have to be complicated. You don't have to be like, the treaty of da 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 da, said that, like, wait, okay, maybe, but like, all babies deserve protection and safety and food. And so I think just like simplifying things, because I'm not like an encyclopedia. I can't like talk about historical events, like, I can't pull things like that out of my hat all the time. But I don't think it has to be that difficult.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think like a lot of people just, I was talking to someone else about a whole other issue, and I was saying, I think like people get really scared sometimes with what they don't know, and therefore they just don't even want to have the conversation because they're so nervous about not being informed enough or saying the wrong thing. And I think it's like, you can't, if the respect is there, and the genuine curiosity and intrigue and willingness to sort of have those conversations, even if they're uncomfortable, if that's there, then like, it's okay if you don't know everything. But I think a lot of people are just so nervous. Yeah, exactly.
You don't have to make statements. Ask questions.
That's a statement is slightly less appealing than someone with genuine curiosity. I think that's how I've always approached it.
Yeah, absolutely.
What is your advice for if someone is just listening to this and they're like feeling overwhelmed, feeling this sort of crushing, a feeling of what the world sort of feels like right now? What's your advice to them? Who maybe someone, who wants to learn more, or who wants to have these conversations, or who wants to help? What would be your advice to them?
I would say think small. Like, I think it's so easy to get overwhelmed and start from, how do I change the world, or how do I help change the world and stuff. And I think of like community the same way I think about family, is that like, ideally, if we're all taking care of our own, then everyone's being taken care of. So if you're actually like thinking really small and thinking about your city council, for instance, which I think is like, an important concept that gets overlooked. It's like, you don't always have to talk about who's running for president. You could talk about who's running for city council. And if we're all thinking on that level, then everyone's actually doing the work, like the big picture. We're building a puzzle together. So I would think, thinking small so that everyone can be taken care of.
Now, this is going to display my terrible interviewing skills, because now that would have been a perfect ending to this, but I'm so intrigued by something you just said. Are you really interested in politics across the country? One of the other reasons I ask is because I saw you reposted it was the nominee for Kentucky's Senate member, right?
Yeah.
How much do you pay attention to that? And like, I always wondered if, touring around the country, does that make you more intrigued about this, or has politics just been something that you've always been really passionate about?
Well, I lived
or curious
in Kentucky.
about.
So I lived in Kentucky for a long time.
Oh, no.
So I have a personal, like, agenda, not, I don't know if you'd call it agenda, but interest. Like, a lot of my friends are in Lexington. I lived in Lexington for a while. I crashed at my friend's horse farm for years. Seeing as how like Mitch McConnell was just a terrible stain on Kentucky, and now that he's gone, like, it feels like Charles Booker, and he's actually run a few times. And my friend who actually has done my album art, Robert Beatty, he's done all my album art. He made a really killer poster for Charles Booker, and I posted that years ago when he was running. And this time, he's gotten a little further ahead, and so it was just like just a really natural reaction to him winning the Democratic candidacy.
My hope is, yeah, I've always been very intrigued by Andy Bashir. I think, yeah, like because I lived in Columbus for so many years, I heard or I would pay attention a little bit to the politics in Kentucky, and yeah, people would just rave about him, and it seems like, yeah, it's I guess just by proximity, but yeah, I was just so curious because yeah, it's Kentucky is not one that people talk about a lot, so yeah, that makes sense that you live there.
I hope that changes because like there's some now with Mitch McConnell out of the way, I think that there's a lot of potential there. So we'll see.
Kentucky feels like something. Maybe this is what makes it all come full circle. Is like Kentucky's this place where, yeah, you get to have those difficult conversations, but it feels like there could actually be room for change, versus like just talking to a brick wall. Like Kentucky seems like there's really interesting things happening there, and I think that's because people are willing to talk to each other and connect with each other on those small ways, versus just sort of writing someone off and stuff like that.
I hope so. I hope that's true. That's what it feels like.